миллиардтан астам қаралым жинаған екен. Негізгі мақсаты видеода жаңағы айтып өткендей ақпарат арқылы әлемді жақсы жаққа қарай өзгерту. Биографиясында жазылған енді барынша аударуға тырыстық. Енді көрсетілетін видеода ол өз қызметінде жиі қолданатын мобильдік журнализмнің қыр-сырымен бөліседі сіздермен. Тағы да бұл жерде ескерту айта кетейік. Бұл эфирді тек қана ол форумның сіздер үшін арналған болғаннан кейін қыр-сырын айтады. Сол себепті эфирді барынша көрсетеміз деп үміттенеміз. Енді және айта кететін жайт, телефон қолына ұстап журналист болып жүрген адам ғой. Бірақ оның жәнегі фишкасы дейміз, телефонға ғана емес, тағып жүретін көзілдірігі арқылы, және камерасы орнатылған, сол арқылы да ақпарат жинап, соны камераға түсіріп жүретін журналист. Өте қызықты. Ендеше бізде, сізде Юсуфтан қалмай, тағы да айта кетем, ұйымдастырушылардың ұсынған технологияларын пайдаланып, синхронды аударманы тыңдау үшін наушниктеріңізді тексеріп бір таға беріңіздер. Сонымен қазақша айтатын болсақ, Жүсіп Австралиядан дұғай сәлеммен мастер-класс өткізетін Омар Юсуф. Видео. Thank you. Рахмет.
Salam Yatspir! Dear participants, I'd love to congratulate you on the 5th Kaz Forum, as well as the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the United States and Kazakhstan, as well as the upcoming 30th anniversary of Kazakhstan's independence. My name's Yusuf Omar, and I'm excited to be joining you for the next hour, all the way from Gold Coast, Australia, to be talking to you about how to make viral videos with your mobile phone and how to change the world. Okay, so here's the 4 chapters that we're going to be going through together today. Firstly, we're going to be looking at the top 10 social media trends that are impacting newsrooms in the West in terms of the way they produce and create content for online audiences. This is going to include an understanding of some of the algorithmic changes that are taking place, the legal framework, and what this means for you as a digital publisher. 2, we're going to look at how to target younger audiences. How do the Gen Zs and millennials consume content online? And what does that mean for the way that we package and format our news? 3, we're going to be looking to find your mojo, your mobile journalism. We're going to look at some very practical tips for how to shoot, edit, and package content using your mobile phone. And 4, we're going to look at how to make your videos go viral, understanding the specifics of each platform and why YouTube is different to Facebook and why Facebook is different to Instagram, so that you can succeed in the digital landscape. Okay, so before we actually get into the course content, I should probably introduce myself, because you're probably wondering, who is this guy with his hat backwards, and how do we know that he really knows what's happening in the digital media landscape?
Hey, what's up guys? My name's Yusuf Omar. I'm coming to you today from Brisbane, Australia. I'm a mojo, a mobile journalist. I tell stories with my phone, and I'm also a wearable journalist, telling stories with wearable camera sunglasses. I've been a journalist for about 10 years. I used to work at CNN International in London. I was the mobile editor at the Hindustan Times in India, and I've been a foreign correspondent across Syria and much of the Middle East. I'm also the co-founder of #OurStories. We're a video publisher. We train communities around the world how to tell stories with their phones, and we curate that into shows about people positively changing the world.
Today, I'm going to be sharing with you some of my secret sauce and my tips for how we were able to grow such a big audience, how we were able to build this global journalism company, and predominantly do it with people filming content on mobile phones. Now, we're particularly good at reaching young audiences, and it's really important if you're getting into the digital media space that you are looking at young audiences, because around the world, especially in a country like Kazakhstan, there's so many young people. You have such a young population, and those people are looking for news and information that's not boring and traditional, but is relevant to them while also being factually accurate. So the first thing you should know is that I've actually visited Kazakhstan. I was invited to speak at a conference a few years ago in Almaty, and I had an incredible experience. Literally, I was treated like a film star. I had tons of cameras all around me and people taking video, and the media were very nice, and the local community showed me to the top of the highest mountains, and I saw eagles, and I had the most incredible experience. I even got to taste eating horse meat, which I believe is pretty popular. Now, when I arrived in Kazakhstan, what I realized was that a lot of young people were pretty frustrated with the global perception that had been created around their country because of silly movies like Borat that had put Kazakhstan in a bad image and a bad light, and it wasn't an accurate depiction of the country. So the first thing I did when I got there was I made a video looking at what Kazakhstan's really like from the perspective of young people themselves. And this is that video. Often when people think of Kazakhstan, welcome to Kazakhstan. Thank you. The first thing that comes to mind
Kazakhstan
is that stupid Borat movie.
My name is Borat.
Everyone thought about Kazakhstan like Borat.
This is my country of Kazakhstan.
People don't even speak like that in Kazakhstan.
Welcome to our country.
Now you can watch that video on our Facebook and our Instagram account, but the point here and the first social media trend that we're seeing around the world is video, video, video. When you look at the amount of data that's traveling around the internet, video makes up the vast majority of data consumed. And when we look at social media platforms, all of the major platforms are prioritizing video. Instagram recently announced that they've moved from a picture sharing platform to primarily a video sharing platform, and the algorithm will prioritize video. Facebook have done the same for a very, very long time. Video has been the centerpiece of Facebook's social media feeds. And we're seeing that video is the real focus area for digital publishers in the West. And one of the easiest ways that you can migrate to succeed in the digital media landscape is to focus on your video publishing. So whether you are a radio journalist or a print journalist or a photography journalist, looking at how you can package all of your content in video format. And we're going to be looking at some really easy ways to do that during this workshop. Okay, so the second major digital media trend that we see is that mobile journalism, is going mainstream. The idea of people shooting content with their mobile device like I'm doing right now. So before COVID-19, I used to speak on stages all over the world and tell people that mobile journalism, people with mobile phones was the future, and people often disregarded it. They're like, nah, it's not professional, it's very amateur. And then when COVID-19 hit, many newsrooms around the world didn't have a choice. They suddenly had to do Zoom interviews with experts, or they had to have their correspondents filming with mobile phones in the field. And now that idea of mobile journalism is now mainstream. Major news organizations around the world are relying on mobile phones to create their content. And to tell you what, it doesn't make a difference to the audience. They don't care whether it's filmed on a big camera or a small camera. They just want a good story. And right now, mobile phones that are in your pocket, they're like a Ferrari, and you're driving it in first gear. They have the power to create
Бұл
incredible
видеодан
pieces of
кейін
content.
тікелей эфирде
4K
Юсуфтың
cameras,
өзімен
high-definition
сұхбаттаса
cameras,
аламыз.
if you can
Сұрақ-жауаптар
access that
осы
potential,
фильмнен
you can
кейін
create some
болады.
amazing content. So the second tip is Mojo is going mainstream. The third digital media tip that we're observing around the world is that UGC, user-generated content, is now being curated from communities. So we're seeing major newsrooms around the world that are no longer only relying on their journalists and their reporters and their correspondents, but are now increasingly tapping into the global community or the Kazakh community to create content with them. And often historically, newsrooms have mainly relied on user-generated content for two kinds of things, either breaking news like a terrorism attack or something major, or for really funny stuff when somebody falls over or does something comical. But that is just the tip of the iceberg, and below that there are so many more different types of stories that you could be curating from a community if you start tapping into user-generated content. Of course, that requires a diligent layer of fact-checking and verification, because they're not professional journalists that you're working with at the end of the day. The fourth digital media tip that we're observing is diverse revenue streams. In the old internet, you would purely rely on people coming to your website, and you might have banner ads and that kind of stuff where you can monetize the audience, or subscribing to a newsletter and they might have to pay for that subscription service to access your website. But now we're seeing people be able to monetize in a variety of ways. Sometimes they're running ads on Facebook, sometimes they're doing branded content or sponsored content, sometimes they're doing partnerships with other organizations, but creating a diversity of revenue streams across a diversity of platforms has become very important to global digital publishers, because it means if one algorithm changes or one monetization stream dries up, they have other revenue streams that they can tap into. So it's very important to have a diversity of digital revenue streams. The fifth tip that we're seeing in the digital media landscape is focusing on solutions-based storytelling, or what's called constructive journalism. Often the old maxim in traditional media was that if it bleeds, it leads. Bloody front pages of newspapers sold more newspapers. But now we see an environment where young people resonate with solutions. They don't just want to hear about problems in Kazakhstan. They want to hear about communities and initiatives and projects that are making those problems better. So the next tip that I suggest you focus on as you move into the social media landscape is solutions-based storytelling. Not just looking at the problem, but looking at how we can make Kazakhstan better. All right, in at number 6 is the stories format. Now, when I visited Kazakhstan and I looked at young people consuming content on their mobile phones, I saw the same trend that's taking place all over the world. And that is people primarily consuming on the stories format. Now that's those little circles that you see on the top of Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok. The stories format is vertical video. It tends to be clickable. It's pretty short form, and it is now taking over from the news feed as the primary way that people consume content online, according to Facebook. So if you're not already developing strategy for the stories format, you should definitely be giving it some consideration now. 7, augmented reality. Now, when I visited Kazakhstan, I noticed that a lot of young people love taking selfies, just like young people around the world. And they also love using augmented reality lenses to create a flower crown or to give themselves butterfly wings or doggy tongue. You know the deal, those selfie lenses that young people use all over the world. But augmented reality is now becoming a very important part of the digital media landscape. What's happening here is that in the old days, the primary way that we inputted or engaged with technology was through a QWERTY keyboard typing with a mouse. We then moved to the mobile phone screen being the main way that we engage with technology. We would search something by typing it into the touchscreen, or we might even use our voice to use Siri or Google Home to be able to command our mobile device. But the next trend that's emerging is that people are interacting with technology through their mobile camera. So they're scanning QR codes to check into a location or to pay for something. They're using the selfie lenses on their faces. And that trend of augmented reality being a tool that people can use to engage with the world is becoming very interesting. So in the context of journalism, for example, at my organization, #OurStories, we use augmented reality lenses to assist people to either create cool stories with their phones or to engage with our stories in interesting ways. For example, they might nod their heads to the left or right to follow a quiz where they answer questions, or they might use their head to move a little bin to recycle. So augmented reality is becoming a really big trend in the digital media landscape. Number 8, and another key idea that journalists in Kazakhstan should start paying attention to, is virtual reality. Now, virtual reality, unlike augmented reality, is when you put on a headset and you are totally immersed in the story that you are consuming. And it could be a game, it could be a video. Virtual reality is still a small niche part of the internet, right? There's not hundreds of millions of people using it. There's a few pretty dorky people like me that are interested in virtual reality. But it is becoming a bigger and bigger slice of the pie, and you can do really incredible journalism experiences using this technology. Now, it might not be big now, but it's important to make investments in these building blocks so that when these technologies do become very popular and in everyone's homes, your news organization is ready. Number 9 is social live audio. We're seeing apps like Clubhouse and even Anchor on Twitter and even Facebook live audio take off in a meaningful way, which allows people to set up virtual rooms where they can have audio-based discussions, like a radio show, but on social media. This is a very easy transition for radio partners and even television broadcasters, and it's something we should all be paying attention to because this space is growing very quickly right now, this live social audio arena. And number 10 is artificial intelligence. We are seeing newsrooms around the world, especially the wire services like Bloomberg and Associated Press, that are able to create algorithms that, believe it or not, can actually write stories on their own. Basically robots that are doing journalism. And that's really interesting. For example, when Usain Bolt was still running the Olympics, and if he ran a particular race in a particular time at a particular venue, that's a pretty easy story for an artificial intelligence algorithm to pull all that information, and create the sentences and create the story. So it's really important to invest in artificial intelligence in your newsroom to make your newsroom smarter. Now, of course, that technology doesn't mean that the role of journalists goes away or that we don't require editors and journalists. We do, because there's so much information to sift through, to separate the voices from the noise, to separate the facts from the fiction. But these tools can help us in that endeavor. So an investment in artificial intelligence in a newsroom is very valuable right now. Okay guys, so that was the top 10 digital media trends that we're seeing around the world in Western newsrooms that could have an impact and influence newsrooms and journalists and storytellers in Kazakhstan. I now want to look at the top trends for how to tap into young audiences specifically. And importantly, what are some of the misunderstandings that we have about young audiences that we need to clear up? Let's go.
To reach younger audiences, maybe you need to rock a hat and some sunglasses. If only it was that simple. It's not. So first up, there's a few critical misunderstandings about young audience. The first misunderstanding is that they lack attention. That's fundamentally not true. Young people will binge watch an entire season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons of Game of Thrones in one weekend. They have a lot of attention for good quality content. Attention is not the issue. The second misunderstanding or misconception is that young people don't have any interest in news or they don't value news. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, off the back of the 2016 elections, when Donald Trump was elected, publications like the New York Times saw a spike in subscriptions. People were desperate for good, reliable content. And a lot of those subscriptions came from younger audiences.
Here is 10 simple tips to reach younger audiences. And the first one is to go where young people are. If your strategy is based around a newsletter, you've got to ask yourself, are young people using their email inboxes that much? If your strategy is around a website or a .com strategy, you got to ask yourself if young people are visiting URLs. Try to be where people are already consuming content. So if they're on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat, you should try and have a presence there. But it's not just about having a presence on that social media platform, but delivering content in a unique way that is native to that social media platform. So point number 2 is about formatting for the platform. We know that if you take TV content and try and put it up on Facebook or YouTube, it doesn't seem to work. The way that it's structured is fundamentally different to how online audiences consume. But I want to take this a step further and say that content that's designed for YouTube might actually not work on Instagram, and stuff that's made for Instagram might not necessarily work on Snapchat. So we need to get really specific around each platform. What we do know across all the platforms is that there's one particular format that seems to be taking off, and that has a lot in common, and that's the stories format. The stories format is those little circles you see up the top of Instagram and Snapchat, even YouTube Shorts. All the platforms moving towards stories formats, and it's mobile optimized, it's vertical, it's clickable, it's highly interactive, it has quizzes and all kinds of other functions to it. And the stories format is really where you should be spending a lot of your attention. According to Facebook, the stories format will take over from the feeds as the predominant way that people consume content on their platform. So if you're not already considering how to deliver unique content using the stories format, the ephemeral clickable videos, you really need to start paying attention to that, because it's a big part of the social media landscape right now across all of the social media apps. Tip 3 is what we call derivative content strategies. A lot of you guys might not have a social media team of 50 or 100 people, and often you're the same person that's working on many different social media platforms at the same time. Derivative content strategies means that you can take one piece of content and have many different derivatives or many different versions of it. So imagine you do a 1-hour Facebook Live, and from that Facebook Live, you cut it up into 5 1-minute explainer videos. And from there, you cut it up into a stories format piece for Instagram. And from there, you cut it up into a 20-second piece for YouTube. And from there, you cut it up into a 1-minute piece for TikTok. That's one piece of content with many different derivatives. So when your reporter's out in the field, try to think about all those different derivatives so you can get as much content as you can from one story. Tip 4 is to provide insights and analysis. In journalism school, you're taught about the who, where, what, when, why, how, the 5 W's and the H. The thing is, young audiences are already finding out what's happened, where it's happened, and when it's happened on social media way before you can deliver it. Number 5 is solutions-based storytelling. Young generations have grown up with terrorism and fear-mongering piped into their cell phones from the day they were born. They don't want to watch it, and they certainly don't want to share it. Young people are looking for constructive journalism, solutions-based storytelling. News organizations that say, here's a problem in the world and here's somebody making it better, an organization or an individual. We don't just want to know about the world, we want to know about how we can change it as young audiences. And that's why it's so important to try and find those answers. Let me tell you, this is not as easy as straight up and down journalism where you talk about problems. Finding solutions requires a lot of research and requires a lot of investigations. But when you do, you provide people with a more holistic piece of storytelling, where they feel that at the end there's a call to action, there's something that they can do about that in their immediate community. For me, some of the best stories is when you find local solutions to global problems, because that's when you start tapping into international audiences. Tip 6 is to focus on watch time. There's so many vanity metrics when we look at social media, whether it's likes or views, but social media platforms today are primarily looking at watch time, retention, how long people are watching a story for, because that's a really good indication of whether that's good quality content, whether it's sticky, whether people want to get through to the end. So how do you get people to watch to the end of your content? Well, it's about structuring it with a lot of suspense. You've got to keep people at the edge of their seats. You've got to keep moments of, but wait, there's more. And that's quite difficult for broadcast journalists, because often you put the most important stuff up top and then kind of delay the least important stuff. Whereas in this format, you want to continually keeping people on the edge of their seats, trying to find out what's going to happen next. Think like a movie. Think about lots and lots of moments of suspense in your narratives.
Point number 7 is to be colloquial, be conversational, be human. Often we find in traditional media, we speak in very formal tones using lots of jargon. On social media, if you're tapping into younger audiences, talk to people like you're talking to their friends. Talk in a very simple, straightforward, and easy to understand way. There's no point making the story more complicated than it needs to be.
And number 8 is make a checklist. When we started out on digital media, it was just my co-founder and I, and we were doing really, really well. We produced hundreds of videos and got millions of views. And then we started building out our team and we started doing many stories a day, and our numbers started plummeting because we started to do everything. Funny cat videos, Game of Thrones, UFC. And what we learned is we'd lost track of who we were and our audience didn't know who we were. It's really important to make a checklist of these are the kind of stories we are doing for young audiences, and these are the kinds of stories we're not doing for young audiences, because you can get into a habit of trying to do everything. And when you do everything, you're nothing. Nobody knows what to remember you for, they don't know what you're good at. So it's really, really important. Create that checklist, and if a story ticks all the boxes of your checklist, then it's something you want to cover. And if it doesn't, maybe you don't. Number 9, give a lot of attention to sharing. Often when we see people creating digital content, they spend 90% of their time working out what the story is going to look like and how they're going to make it, who's going to be in it, what the script is like, what the visuals like. And then the last like 10% or even like 2% of the time working out what the thumbnail is, what the share text is, what the headline is, what the tags are. I would recommend spending 50% of your time thinking about the engagement strategy of how you're going to share the video, which Facebook groups it's going to be in, which social media platforms are going to share it, which influencers are going to share it, which hashtags are going to appear in it, and the other 50% of the time focus on the actual story. It's really, really important, especially the thumbnails. What people click through to and what that headline is make or break. That's like a big part of the battle. If you get a good thumbnail and a good headline, you've got a good chance of getting an audience to watch this piece of content. And 10, finally, it seems so obvious, but so many media publications don't do it. If you are targeting young audiences, hire young people. You should have 18 and 19-year-olds in your newsroom working on your digital teams, influencing and inspiring the stories that you do. Young people should be watching this video right now. You can't have a bunch of 30 and 40 and 50 and these 60-year-olds trying to tell stories to 18 and 19-year-olds. They just don't know what's up. So get some young people in your newsroom and be okay with listening to young people. It's time that we bring them to the boardrooms. It's time that we bring them to the decision-making tables. Chapter 3 is now my favorite part. And that's Mojo, mobile journalism, how to create content with your mobile phone. We're gonna start with social discovery, how to find the best stories in Kazakhstan using a couple online tools like Google Trends and CrowdTangle and Reddit. Then we're gonna move on to social publishing, how to shoot and edit using your mobile phone. And then finally, we're gonna look at social engagement, how to make your videos go viral, how to create social media sharing strategies. Okay, so you ready to find your mojo? Because after this Cuz Forum session, I'm gonna be expecting you guys to send me videos that you've shot with your mobile phone. Let's go.
If you want to be a vlogger, an influencer, or a journalist, you need good video ideas. Here's 5 ways to find them.
Google Trends is really useful because it shows you in real time what the internet is talking about, what people are searching. Is so important to find out what they're interested in. The beauty of Instagram is that you can actually follow a hashtag to find amazing stories on a daily basis. Reddit is described as the front page of the internet, where you have forums around particular subject matters, and that's where people are discussing topics. TweetDeck allows you to have multiple feeds at the same time, and this just helps me keep on top of my beat, my topic. I know every time somebody's tweeted using that word, a part of Facebook that most people don't even check out, the live area. It shows what's happening around the world right now through the perspective of people. So now it's about you being able to find these amazing stories and tell them in video format. Some of the basic principles of filmmaking and storytelling have stayed the same for a very, very long time, and one of those is storyboarding. So whether you're drawing on a whiteboard or a little piece of paper or even on your phone, you're gonna draw a little grid, something like this. These 16 blocks represent your story, and if you can make a story on paper or on a board, it's much easier to articulate it on camera. You can consider a storyboard a bit like a recipe, a bit like an instruction manual. It tells you as the videographer exactly what to film when you go out in the field, and it shows your video editor, if you're not the one editing, exactly how to structure the story. It also helps you work it out in your head, the chapters, and see that it all comes together on paper. They did it for Mickey Mouse, and when they were creating comic books, they did it for all the films that you watch, and it will make an enormous difference to the content that you create on your mobile device. So I am storyboarding for an episode on beekeeping. There is a guy who is installing beehives on the top of big buildings in the inner city, because it's really important to bring bees back to our cities to pollinate plants, and of course we get some honey out of it. So my opening shot of my storyboard, I want it to be entertaining, I want it to be fun. Maybe it's maybe it's somebody screaming ah, and it's me with bees, and I've got bees all around me, and that's my opening shot. Maybe next we're gonna get into what's happening. So buildings, 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 and a little guy at the top. And we can say this guy is putting beehives on the top of inner city buildings. But why would he do that? Putting a central question up the top. Because that doesn't sound fun. That sounds like bees. Then I'm gonna go into the myth about bees, or what people already think about bees. So I'm gonna draw a little bee. People think bees are stings. And they're annoying. And they make a noise. And they're annoying. But they're incredibly helpful. Now maybe I'll have a flower. Lucky I'm a journalism person and not an artist. So now I have a flower, and now we explain why bees are so important. They pollinate flowers, and if they don't, the flowers die. Now I'm gonna put the problem statement. Problem. The problem is bee populations are going down over time. And if bee populations go down, vegetation dies. And if vegetation dies, we don't survive. Now we come back to our hero, beekeeper Jack. So Jack has got an idea. Jack's idea, intro Jack. Now Jack can tell us about his idea. Jack's big idea is to put beehives in the inner city, and that brings the bees back, and everybody's happy, and we have life and vegetation again. And of course, as a result of bees, we have honey. We have honey. Woohoo! Honey. Now we've got people eating honey. They're yummy. Everybody's happy. The bees are happy. The people are happy. Jack's happy because he's got money from the honey that he's selling. And this is a little bit about how we storyboard. Storyboarding is critical because now I can go out on my shoot, I can say, okay, cool, this works structurally, it's really exciting, but you know what? I actually think Jack is too late here. So let's bring Jack in over here. And I actually think that the flower sequence is too soon. So maybe we should bring that here. It allows you to completely restructure your narrative. You can see it visually, and sometimes a script on paper, writing it out, doesn't quite do justice. We're working in visual, so you gotta think visually, And that's why a storyboard is so effective. Guys, I have been a mobile journalist and a storyteller for 10 years now. I still storyboard all my stories. It takes the quality up, it makes my process easier, it makes me more prepared, more organized, and I can't recommend it enough. The difference between a professional journalist and an amateur storyteller is that journalists are pegged to journalistic ethics and principles, and at the center of that is facts and factual accuracy and fact checking. There's an old saying that journalism is about capturing the closest version of the truth. And it's so important that you fact check the stories that you create. The moment your audience get the impression that your content is no longer trustworthy, they can no longer rely on that information, you've lost this game, you're done. So here's a few tips how to fact check. The first is to check what reputable and other news sources are saying about a story. Be able to corroborate your story by looking at how other journalists are reporting on that subject matter to help verify, but don't trust them too much because other journalists get it wrong too. I've seen over and over again when one news organization has reported something as a fact, like somebody's name, and it's spelled wrong, and then it gets spread across many news organizations because they just copy from the last one. So make sure you do check for yourself, but also cross-reference against other news organizations. 2, this sounds so simple, but do a Google search. You'll be amazed at how many stories you can dispel that are not actually factually accurate by simply doing a quick Google search. Often you find the truth there. 3, look at what other journalists have published about that subject matter before. Do a deep dive into research to really understand that subject matter, to understand all that has been said about that topic before, and you might find some clues as to whether the story that you're investigating is real or not. When doing journalism, you should also try and look for at least 2 sources on any piece of information. If somebody teaches you something or tells you something, or if a scientist gives you a point of view, find another point of view, find another perspective. We should have at least 2 sources on any story. Especially if you're covering crime and somebody's alleged to have committed a crime, it's often best to wait till a police case has been opened. It's often best to wait till the police have at least confirmed that that report has been filed before reporting that story. Nowadays, of course, we have so much information that's baked into video. You can look at this timestamps, date stamps, location stamps.
Horrific reports of atrocities committed by Turkish-backed fighters on those very allies.
Do all you can to verify that when somebody sends you a photo or video that says it is at a particular date at a certain time, that is in fact the case. Look at the location in which that video was taken and cross-reference it. Do what we call triangulation, where you go into Google Maps and look at the vicinity of that area and see if it represents the place that the people say it is. If somebody says that they've taken a video today, but the weather clearly looks like it's raining and it wasn't raining today, check that information. There's lots of simple ways that you can do that. And of course, one of my favorite ways is to do a Google reverse image search. If somebody sends you an image and you're not quite sure if it's real, you can go onto Google and instead of hitting search by text, you hit search by image. You can then upload the image and Google will search that image against all previous uses of that image or any part of that image. And what it'll do is it'll show you the original source of that image. So I was once doing a story on former South African President Jacob Zuma and his son, who had allegedly been arrested.
Did Jacob Zuma's son, Duduzane, just get arrested?
And there was a photo going viral showing him in handcuffs being pulled away by a police officer, but it wasn't true. We were able to do a Google reverse image search and find that the actual student that was arrested was a completely different student at a completely different time, and somebody had photoshopped the face and changed it. Super simple way to fact check images. So guys, it's up to you to be the first barrier against fake news. The best way we can fight fake news is to help people stop spreading it. So think before you share.
All right, guys, here's my 9 tips for videography with your mobile phone. Let's do this.
Orientation. It doesn't matter if you shoot landscape or vertical. What is important is that you continue to do the same framing throughout. You can't start half your video vertically and then finish it landscape. It's got to be the same. Generally, I believe that people that are enjoying a lean back experience like Netflix or watching a YouTube video, that tends to be landscape. But if I'm on a bus, on a train, engaging with Snapchat, Instagram, that's a very vertical, lean forward experience. And that's how I decide if I'm going to go lean back or lean forward, vertical or landscape. For the purpose of this demonstration, let's go landscape. There's many things we can fix about your video. We can stabilize it and edit. We can even change the colors. But one of the few things that we struggle to repair, that we struggle to bring back, is bad quality audio. So listen out. For example, here, you want to make sure it's not too windy so you don't hear. You want to make sure that there's no sounds of cars and buses, or maybe there's an air conditioner or fan that's happening in the room that you're in right now. Turn that off. Best case scenario, you want to have a microphone. But if you don't have a microphone, get closer. Lighting. Make sure the light is always behind the smartphone. So right now I'm quite well lit. But if we turn around over here and the sun is behind me, suddenly I'm silhouetted. There's no details, you can't see me. Always make sure the windows are behind the camera. The sun is behind the camera. Composition. Let's look at the rule of thirds. So if I was filming Andy, he could look interesting in the middle of the shot, but it's often more interesting if we put him at these intersections. So I'm gonna move my camera and put him at that intersection. This is what we call the rule of thirds. Splitting the camera up into thirds and putting Andy at the intersection of those thirds to create a more dramatic shot. So composition is also about framing the shot so it contextualizes who that character is. Andy loves Shoreditch, and one of the main streets in Shoreditch is Brick Lane. So if I was gonna film Andy, I get a shot of him with that Brick Lane sign right behind him, so it contextualizes him. If I wanted to create a little bit more depth, I'd come around here and capture that looking down the street using the lines of the road to create a sense of depth. Often when I see amateur video, there's just too much movement. It's like, oh, look at this bicycle and look at this car coming by. Treat your video a little bit like a series of stills. If I was gonna get this landscape, still of the bicycle. 1, 2, 3. Another shot of the wall. 1, 2, 3. Another shot of the sky. 1, 2, 3. And if you are going to move the camera, move with conviction. If you're gonna pan, start in one location, like here. 1, 2, 3. Pan and land. 1, 2, 3. So these are the bicycles that you can get around London. If I was gonna do a story on them, I'd need a variety of shots. Start out with the wide shot, really establishing the location. I would then get a mid shot. Maybe this would be my mid shot. I might then get some close-ups. Get in on those details, really get the gears. A few more close-ups in my variety of shots. Maybe I'm coming down here. And that's how you achieve a variety of shots. For any shoot that you do, any person you meet, any object you shoot, aim to have at least 4 or 5 different angles. One of the biggest differences between amateur and professional video is the ability to create a sequence with a sense of continuity. Something happens, then something else, shot behind a shot creates a sequence. Here's an example. So the sequence starts with a shot of Andy arriving at the store, and then I want another shot of Andy from this angle as he comes through the door, and then I'll get another angle from inside of Andy arriving. And then we'll get shots of Andy having a look around, taking his jacket off. And then he unzips the jacket. And then he pulls it off the hanger. And then he pulls it round. And then finally, Andy ends up at the mirror.
Visuals comes with experience, but once you've got it, it makes the way you create content so much smoother. If I'm talking about the economy grinding to a halt in my video, that's pretty hard to visualize, but I might show a truck slowing down. If I say that we are entering a new era, I might show a visual of somebody walking through a door. This is what we mean when we talk about writing to visuals, making sure that your images and your visuals mirror each other. Okay guys, so that was a few examples of how to shoot with your phone. Of course, don't bring bad television habits here. We're teaching you tools, not rules. You don't necessarily need a tripod. You don't necessarily need to do anything. It's all up to you. Be creative, have fun. This is a new era, and it's a new form of videography. Invent your own visual storytelling language.
Now look, there are a lot of apps depending on what kind of phone you have, Android or iOS, different range of Android phones. But what we can agree on is it doesn't matter what app you use, whether it's KineMaster or LumaFusion or iMovie or Quick or Power Director or WeVideo. There's a few principles that are exactly the same across all video editing apps. Here are 7 tips to edit video on your phone. And this looks at a workflow. How do you get the right workflow? Number 1, import your footage. This means taking your footage from your camera roll, your gallery, anywhere on your phone, and importing it into the app that you want to edit on. I find it easiest to collect my footage in an album before I take it into the video editing app because it's all in one place. I know where it is, it's neatly arranged. It just makes your media management a lot easier to navigate. Tip number one, importing. Number two, audio footage. The first thing I lay down on the timeline is just the voices. People talking, me talking, people talking, everything talking. All of the context. I lay all of that down first before the visuals, and then I hold them down on any app and I put them in the right order. Say this one comes first, this one comes second, third, fourth. Put your shots in the right order, step number two. Step number three, trimming. Now that you got your bites in the right order, you're gonna click on each one in whichever app you're using, and you're gonna trim the left and right to get your in and out point. Starting your bites at the right point, ending your bites at the right point, keeping it as tight and concise as possible. You really want to get to the very crux of what people are saying. Tip number three, trimming. Number four, now we're going to make it visual with overlay. This means that you've got one channel and you're going to add a second channel of overlay. Depending on the quality of your mobile device, it may or may not allow you to do overlay, B-roll, but hopefully it does. So basically now you're going to take your interviews or your pieces to camera where people are talking, and on top of that you're going to put visuals that mirror what they're saying. So if somebody says that we are stepping into a new era, you want a shot of somebody stepping forward. If you want to hear that the economy is grinding to a halt, you want to see a wheel slowly slowing down. Matching your visuals to the words that we are hearing, that's your overlay, your second channel. 5, subtitles. About 70% of the audience on Facebook may not be listening to the audio on your video, so you want to subtitle it in your language, in English, in whatever language you choose to do it. Subtitles are really important, and you can go into most video editing apps, you can include subtitles, change the font, change the color, change the way they come in and out, but whatever you do, make sure they're easy to read on a mobile phone. Okay, next up is music. Music makes me lose control. Music makes me lose control. Music really takes your narrative forward. It helps it move quickly. It creates a sense of inspiration, optimism, aspiration, hope. It drives the narrative forward. Music often connects your edit together. It creates a sense of mood and emotion. So use music, but two things. One, be careful, because music is an editorial decision. If you play powerful music, somebody looks powerful. If you play sad music, they look sad. You can make somebody look scary with music. Music can help manipulate emotions, and that's a dangerous thing. So editorially, make sure you're very sensitive about that when applying music to your edit. And two, don't use music that's copyrighted. If you use Lady Gaga, you're gonna get in trouble. They might even sue you. So look for rights-free music. You can find a bunch of it on YouTube, but stick to stuff that's free or copyleft or that you own. When doing music, you also want to do your levels. You want to make sure you dip the music down when somebody's speaking, and you want to bring it back up when there's nobody speaking. If it's too high, you can't hear what people are saying. The whole experience gets lost. And finally, export. Make sure you got enough space on your phone. Export the highest quality you can, or depending on your device, 4K, HD, whatever you can, and export that to your camera roll, and then you can take it up to the internet and share it with the world. So guys, that was my 7 tips for editing video on your phone. At the end of the day, practice makes perfect. You got this. All right, you guys are doing great. Now stay with me, we're almost at the end. We've talked about the digital media trends that are impacting newsrooms around the world. We've talked about young audiences and the kinds of content you need to create for them. We've looked at mobile journalism and how to create content with your mobile phone. And finally, in this 4th chapter, we want to look at sharing strategies and how to make your videos go viral. It's the last thing that people think about. They shoot the video, they edit the video, they're ready to hit publish, and they're like, oh, how are we gonna get people to watch this? How are we gonna get people to share this? I believe that you should consider all of that stuff before you even create the video content. 50% of your time should be spent thinking about the editorial, what's in the video, the who, where, what, when, why, how. The other 50% of the time should be spent thinking about how you're gonna share it, how people are gonna engage with it. And here's a few considerations. 1, who is gonna watch your video and why? I think you need to be very specific about that so you can target that audience. So if you're doing a piece on soccer or football in Kenya, then you know that football enthusiasts in Kenya would watch that. So people that are following local football teams, that are interested in football culture, that kind of stuff. So know who's gonna watch your piece. 2, know what kind of emotion your content is going to evoke. People share content on Facebook often because it says something about themselves. Your Facebook timeline is a digital representation of who you are. So when I share a video about whales being slaughtered, I'm basically telling my audience, I care about this. I'm passionate about the subject matter, and this is why I'm sharing this content. So understand what kind of emotion your content evokes, And once you understand that, you are then able to understand why people might share this content. People are going to share this video because it's going to make them angry. People are going to share this video because they are passionate about the subject matter. Because at the end of the day, Facebook is a share-based ecosystem. You want people to hit share. You want them to share this piece of content with their friends and family. Next up, you want to look at all the pages, the groups that might be interested in sharing a piece of content. So it's about drawing this big mind map and saying, okay, here's my story. Here's all of the various Facebook pages that are going to share it. Here's all of the various groups that are going to share it. Here's all of the various influencers that are going to share it. And let me get in touch with all of those organizations before I publish my piece of content and tell them it's coming up so that these organizations, these groups, these pages can share it and we can create a ripple effect. Of course, with all these practices, it's important to ensure that you're sharing authentic user behavior. You don't want to give the algorithms and Facebook the impression that you are spamming people. You definitely don't want to be putting content into groups that is not relevant or related to that subject matter. You want to make sure that you're being highly current, highly relevant. You don't want to be spamming people. But I think once you start to create these systems of understanding all of these groups and pages that are sharing your content, it becomes very easy to start to go viral very early. You also want to consider very early on what hashtags you're going to use, what's relevant to the subject matter. List all those hashtags out and it'll be much easier for you to share that content. Your thumbnail or your image that you choose is also critically important to the success of your video. We find that a few things do particularly well with thumbnails. One, when it's slightly weird or odd or strange, that stops people on their timeline. They say, hey, what's that? I need to watch to find out what that is. Two, implied motion tends to do quite well, where it looks like something in that frame is about to change or adapt or differ or something's gonna happen. That does quite well. We find what doesn't do well for us in our thumbnails is profile pictures of people that nobody's seen before. If you just had an image of your main character and it's not a very entertaining image and people don't know who that person is, they don't really have a reason to stick around and watch that piece of content.
And finally, most importantly, is your headline. Of course, when people see your video on the news feed, they're scrolling, they will see a thumbnail image that will start playing as a video, and they'll see your headline on top and your share text. And this is the information that they have that they can read to understand what your story is about. It's really important that you avoid clickbait. Now, I highly encourage you to read the newsfeed guidelines, and I'm going to drop a link to them in the comments section below. But here's some guidelines around how to avoid doing clickbaity headlines and how to make sure that you are doing the most authentic form of communication around your Facebook post. Clickbait is defined by Facebook as when a publisher posts a link with a headline that encourages people to see more without telling them that much information about what they will see. So basically, clickbait intentionally omits important information to try and get you to click through to watch. And that's often misleading, and that's why it's a problem. Especially in a world where we have so much fake news and false information, good, authentic, reliable headlines and share texts are really, really important. An example of a clickbaity headline would be like, "You won't believe what happens next. She fell over and then this happened." These are clickbaity because you don't quite know how that sentence is going to end. You click through to find out in the video, and sometimes these videos don't even answer that question, and that's why they're called clickbait. Facebook tell us that when a page uses clickbaity headlines and share text, their posts are ranked lower in the algorithm. That means that less people will see your videos, and they highly encourage you to create videos with headlines and share text that are accurate and honest. So the two big things that you shouldn't do when doing headlines is one, don't exaggerate or mislead people as to the nature of the video that you're producing. This is the biggest sporting event in the world, and it's not actually the biggest. That's misleading. And two, don't hold back important information that could potentially mislead an audience. Make sure your headlines are engaging. They are things that people want to watch, want to read, will incite some form of excitement about your content or intrigue. But make sure you explain clearly in your headline what's in the box, what people are going to get when they watch that piece of video. So guys, these are just a few basic principles on engagement. I would love to hear from you how you can engage audiences using your video content, what lessons you've learned about the videos that have performed well and those that haven't.
Of course, there's many specifics between each platform, and it's important to understand those platforms so you can optimize for them. And here's a couple key tips to really look out for in the digital media landscape when it comes to each specific platform. When we look at Facebook right now, they are looking to monetize videos and put mid-roll ads in your video, which is generally about the 1 minute mark onwards in. Facebook are looking for videos that are at least 3 minutes in length. So make sure you try and optimize your videos and make sure they're at least 3 minutes if you're publishing on that platform. Facebook is also a share-based ecosystem. So you want to create content that people want to share, and you've got to understand why they would share that piece of content before you even create it. It's really simple to start thinking in this way, but it's fundamentally different to broadcast journalism. Now, YouTube is a whole different beast, and I highly suggest you read the YouTube Creators Playbook that you can find online. But it really unpacks this idea of 3 types of content. And if you imagine for me a pyramid over here, and at the bottom of that pyramid, you've got hub content. Hub content is your everyday sports, weather, news in Kazakhstan, the stuff that's taking place on a daily basis that is part of your daily bulletin. Now, this stuff doesn't bring in millions and millions of new followers. It keeps your existing audiences watching. So that's your hub content. After that, you get your hygiene content. It's a smaller part of the pyramid. Now, this is your evergreen, highly searchable videos, things that will be relevant today, but would also be relevant in the future. Hygiene content is really important for YouTube because it's the way people will discover your page, even if they didn't really know about you. They'll be searching top 10 things to see in Kazakhstan, and they might come across your piece of content. That's hygiene. And then finally, at the top of this big pyramid, you get hero content. And that is your viral video, the piece that brings in millions and millions of new people to find out about you and your page and your account. And of course, not every video can be a hero piece. Maybe once a month you focus on a hero piece of content, a piece of investigative journalism or something that's really unique and niche and special and brings in a bunch of new audiences. So that's a really great way to start thinking about your digital media strategy, which is in terms of these 3 buckets of hub, hygiene, and hero content. And if you start planning and producing and preparing your content in that way, you'll be really well prepared for the future. Like many newsrooms around the world, you probably have a very small digital media team and you're trying to do a lot. If that's the case, I recommend you explore derivative content strategies. Now that means taking one piece of video or one derivative and repackaging it in as many different ways as possible. So for example, imagine if your baseline, your start of your derivative content strategy is a live video, which you present on YouTube or Facebook. And that's like 1 hour long where you're giving a live broadcast and explaining a concept. Now after that, imagine if you take that 1 hour video and you cut it up into 5 5-minute videos and you publish those on Facebook. And you have smaller derivatives which people can engage with. And then if you imagine if you cut those 5-minute videos up into a series of 1-minute videos, which you run up on your Instagram stories and the stories format. Now this is what we mean by derivative content strategy. One long live video into a series of 5-minute videos and a series of 1-minute videos. And you've got all of these different content creating all of these views and shares and likes and engagement, all based on that initial one video. It's something to really explore, which is just being as efficient as possible with the content that you do have and being able to get it into as many different places as possible. Wow, now thank you so much for listening. We've covered a lot in a really short amount of time. I hope you can use these skills with your storytellers to help create amazing videos about Kazakhstan, which we can share with the world. Enjoy the rest of the 5th Kaz Forum, and I hope I can join you at the 6th one, or maybe sooner. I look forward to meeting you all in real life and in person, but until next time, have fun, take care, and make sure you share your stories with me. You can tag me at Yusuf Omar SA, and you can check out at #OurStories. Thanks so much. This is #OurStories. What's yours?
Раз. 1-2 кешіріңіздер. Тамаша бір жақсылап тұрып қол соғып қояйықшы, себебі Юсуфтың өзі қазір эфирге шығады. Сонымен қатар ол зумда да отыр тікелей эфирмен, одан кейін мына жәнегі сізді залды да көріп отыр. Сол себепті білмеймін, енді сіздер көп нәрсені өздеріңізге түртіп алған шығарсыздар, жаңалықтарды көбін сіздер білесіздер өздеріңіз, бірақ бізге ұнағаны жәнегі artificial intellect деп тұр ғой, жасанды интеллект туралы айтқаны жаңалық болды. Одан кейін екіншісі таң қалған нәрсе, енді білмеймін, 50 минуттың қалай өткенін байқамай қалдық. Араларыңызда қалып қалған, ұйықтап қалған ешкімді көрмедік. Ол дегеніміз қызықты болды деп ойлаймын. Дұрыс па? Hi, Юсуф. Түсіндіре кетейін, мені Юсуф естімейтін шығар. Сол себепті біздің аудармашыларға үлкен рахмет. 50 минут бойы бір кідіріссіз аударып отырғаны. Сіздерге көп рахмет, сіздерге де оңайға соққан жоқ. Енді сұрақтарға көшейік. Залдан да сұрақтар қабылдаймыз. Онлайн эфирде көріп отырған көрермендерде қабылдаймыз сұрақтарды. Аудармашыларымыз арамызда көпір болады, аударып отырады. Ал бастайық. Thank you so much, Yusuf. How are you? Қалайсың?
Hey guys, really great to see you all. Thank you so much for hosting me at this conference. I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to work together on this. As you know, I've visited Kazakhstan before. I was really well hosted there. I had a fantastic experience. Over the course of the last 50 minutes where we watched this video together, you guys started to get an understanding of the world that I come from, which is mobile journalism, or Mojo, looking at how we can enable communities to tell stories with their mobile devices and curate that into shows. I'm the co-founder of a company called #OurStories. We are a video publisher, and we have 3.2 million followers around the world across 10 different shows that we publish. Definitely open to having conversations with many partners in Kazakhstan too about the potential to create content with you in the future.
Тамаша, сұрақтарыңыз болса қолдарыңыз көтерсеңіз, мен микрофонды беремін. Әзірше онлайн келген бір сұрағымыз бар екен. Юсуф, өзіңіз жаңа айта кеттіңіз, Алматыда болдым, Қазақстанға бардым деп. Сол Алматыға келген уақытыңызда өзіңіздің әріптестеріңізбен танысқан шығарсыз. Егер де сізге мынандай ұсыныс келсе, қазақстандық инфлюенсермен немесе контент жасаушы адаммен, өзіңіздің әріптесіңізбен бірге коллаборация жасасақ деген. Сондай ұсыныс болса, ол адам кім болар еді және тақырып, қандай тақырыпты таңдар едіңіз?
Thank you so much for the really great question. I think one of the benefits of the internet is that we are kind of forming this global culture. We have more in common than we have apart, and we start to see content perform across the world well. In the context of the work we do, we're often looking for local solutions to global problems. So if there is a local Kazakh story that would be relevant to an international audience that somebody in Los Angeles could be inspired by, or somebody in London, or somebody anywhere in the world. So we're often looking at what we'd call universal themes. And generally it starts with one individual story, a human story. I'll tell you a little bit about the shows that we have, and I think that might help give the influencers and creators in the room an opportunity to understand which show their content might best align with. The first show that we have is the #OurStories show, and that's about celebrating diversity and disruptors. These are people that are saying, here's a problem in the world and here's somebody making it better. And diversity covers everything from Black Lives Matter to racism protests or anti-racism protests to LGBTQ rights. A whole bunch of different things come when we think about diversity. And disruptors includes those that are changing industries, that are recycling, that are upcycling, that are going against the status quo. We then have a show called Our Money, and that looks at teen entrepreneurs that are making the world a better place through small businesses. So if there's really nice stories of young people that are starting businesses in Kazakhstan that are creating positive change and potentially doing very well, we'd love to hear from that. We have a show called Our Health that looks at people staying mentally strong through physical health challenges. So if creators want to work with us on health stories, looking at individuals who are going through health journeys, we'd be interested in working with them on that. We have another show called First Person, and that's an environmental series, and that's shot actually with these camera sunglasses, and it's filmed
through the eyes of people saving the planet. I know in Kazakhstan, there's many good innovators that are looking at how to save the planet, how to recycle, how to be very clever about repurposing existing materials. But we're also looking at the unexpected consequences of climate change, things that people don't expect. So for example, we recently did a story in Nigeria looking at how climate change is leading to young women losing jobs in the farms and eventually becoming sex workers. So if you can find stories about unexpected consequences of climate change, it can be very interesting. We've also got shows looking at sex education, which is a very, very big topic. Mental health, I know, has become a big focus in Kazakhstan over the last few years, especially people that are constructively and finding solutions to mental health problems. So these are just a few of the topics that we would be really interested on partnering with creators and with media organizations in Kazakhstan on.
Жоқ, аудармаш бізде орыс тілге де аударып отырған аудармашымыз бар. Мен сізге жетем қазір. Ағылшынша
Юсуф мырза, саламатсыз ба? Рахмет. Сіздің қазіргі еліңізде сағат қанша екенін білмеймін, бірақ та бізге уақыт бөліп қосылып отырғаныңызға рахмет дейміз. Жалпы өткізген сессияңызға үлкен алғыс, өйткені сіздің манағы sharing is caring деген подход, яғни қамқор болу, ол бөлісу деген мақсатпен жасалған сіздің сессияңыз өте пайдалы болды деп ойлаймын, осы жерде залда отырған адамдардың бәріне. Осы тұрғыда Юсуф мырза, сізге сұрақ, қалай ойлайсыз? Біздер соңғы 3 жылдың ішінде, яғни видео форматтан short stories форматқа өттік, яғни үлкен трансформациядан өттік. Енді сізге сұрақ, алдағы уақытта, осы алдағы 1-2 жылдықта біздер тағы да трансформацияға дайын болу керекпіз бе? Яғни стористан да, манағы YouTube-тағы shorts, TikTok-тағы видео, немесе Instagram-дағы reels та. Яғни үлкен медиа гиганттар, олар монополия сияқты өздері аудиториясын қайтарып алу мақсатында үлкен жұмыс жүргізіп жатыр, яғни барлығы бір формат қойып жатыр. Біздер тағы да одан да қысқалау немесе одан да үлкен бір алға өтіп кеткен бір ақпаратқа дайын болу керекпіз бе, яғни стористан да өтіп кеткен бір нәрсеге.
Thank you. That's a really great question, and one of my favorite topics to focus on, which is what's next and how do we prepare and build our organizations for those changes. I think that we're currently in a transitionary period where we're moving from the circular stories format to this algorithmically delivered reels and TikTok format. And the boundaries are opening up, as in they're moving from 1-minute length to 3-minute length to even 10-minute length. We're now seeing YouTube shorts emerging in that space. So that's the immediate, that's the now, which is focusing on that vertical video, algorithmically served, hyper-focused on niche audiences, right? Your TikTok feed or your Instagram Reels feed is very, very tailored. In answer to your question of where this is going and what's the next big change, the next sea change, the thing that's really going to surprise a lot of media organizations, and I touched on it in my presentation earlier, it really is augmented reality. The reason I'm wearing this funny filter on my face is not just to entertain you guys, but is to remind you that the big change that's coming is through the camera. So at the moment, the primary way that most of your audience are watching your content is on a phone, right? On a glass screen, or they're watching it on a desktop. And the primary input to that technology is the keyboard. They're typing on YouTube to search something, they're typing on a URL to get to the website, they're clicking on an app to access your app, they're commenting with their fingers. The primary input is the keyboard. The primary input is rapidly becoming the camera, and especially we're seeing this in emerging markets. So in order to start thinking about that, it's very wise for newsrooms to start thinking about augmented reality and how they tell stories through the camera, because I think that's going to be the big change over the next 2 to 3 years. I think the other interesting shift that we're seeing is in audio. Recently read a report just this week that said that 1 in 4 women around the world between the ages of 16 and 24 are listening to podcasts at least once a week. That's an enormous amount. 1/4 of all women in that age demographic around the world listen to podcasts. So as newsrooms, I think we need to start thinking about our audio experience. The beauty of audio is
it's very passive. People can do it while they're walking to work or on a bus or cycling. It's not like a mobile phone, which is very intrusive and you're kind of distracted by the screen. And I think there's an easy ability to repurpose a lot of existing formats that we have for the podcast experience. And a derivative of that podcast experience is the live audio that we're seeing, right? On Clubhouse and Anchor and Facebook live audio. So that's another interesting space. So in answer to your question, I would be looking at AR and I'd be looking at live audio. And in answer to your question on bringing audiences back to our .coms or back to our owned and operated, I think really big media organizations are trying to do that by starting OTTs, over the top plays, like their own Netflix, their own streaming services. But for the most part, I really believe that the days of going to your .com or your URL or your app is behind us. And we really need to focus on cross-platform strategies.
Юсуф Мырза, осындай өте қызық, жақсы видео тренинг бергеніңізге алғыс білдіремін. Өте жақсы болды. Енді осындай бір-екі сұрағым бар. Ең алдымен осы бір минуттық видео өндіру үшін мысалы қанша уақыт кетеді өндіруге? Сіз мысалы осы 50 минуттық тренингке қанша уақытты пайдаландыңыз? Екінші сұрақ, мысалы мен қазір Facebook'та парақшамда бір 10.000 фолловер бар. Енді бұрын жай өзім жазып жүретін, енді соны көбейту үшін қалай ойлайсыз, видео көшу керек пе деп. Көп уақыт алса, енді кішкене ерінеміз да.
Thank you so much for your question. In terms of, I think you're looking for specifically monetary value on the cost per video or cost per minute. I think if your media organization is working at between $1,000 and $2,000 a minute to produce video, you're in a pretty good spot. I think you can bring those operating costs down by creating repeatable formats. I think you can bring those costs down by working on Mojo, mobile journalism, like what I've been speaking about, and ultimately by looking at your community becoming your creators. I think the future is where your audience are your creators and you are a curator or an aggregator or a collector of footage. In answer to your second question around whether you guys should get into video if you're planning to grow your account, it's essential. Video makes up about 80% of the internet traffic today, and that number is expected to increase according to Cisco and other bodies that monitor that data. It is the internet. Without video, there is no internet. It makes up the lion's share of content consumption, especially around young audiences. But video won't become linear video. When we think about video, we often think about it like TV, which is consuming a 16:9 frame passively. I think video is going to become a lot more active consumption, where you have to make a lot more decisions, you have to fill out quizzes, you can skip as quickly as you want to. So video is becoming more of a multimedia experience. And within video, you might have written text, which you can swipe up to read. You might have pictures, you might have all these other assets. But yeah, I think video is the main course.
Қуат мырза, селфи көбірек жасау керек сияқты. Селфи видео, селфи форматтағы видео. Мына жақта сіздің және екінші сұрағыңыздың екінші бөлігі аудармашыларға айтарым. Юсуф, шыныңызды айтыңызшы, осы 50 минуттық мастер-класс видеосын жасағанға қанша уақытыңыз кетті?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the beauty of the 50-minute training session is that I filmed it all myself, right? So I filmed it on my mobile phone, walking around for the most part, or on a tripod. I filmed it on a mobile device. So my operating costs are incredibly low. Oh, I see. Oh, we actually had a very tight window. I think we pulled this together in about 10 days, but we had amazing partners at the US Embassy in Kazakhstan, which were really fast at giving us feedback. In fact, they were working until midnight for the last 2 nights, just making sure that it was up to the highest quality. So I think thanks to our kind partners in Kazakhstan, it was very easy to do. So it wasn't that hard to do.
Okay, have a good day, Mr. Yusuf. First of all, I want to say thankful words for your useful masterclass also. And first question for you, How did you start taking a video yourself? And I mean, useful stories, video stories. And the next question, did you afraid to start this blog? I mean, a video blog, to taking video stories also. Thanks you.
Thank you. I love your beret, your red hat. It looks really cool. When did I start doing video production? I started in 2010. I had aspirations to be a journalist. I realized that newsrooms were running out of resources and budgets, and I saw the opportunity to become like RoboCop. You know, RoboCop has many different weapons at his disposal. And in the same way, I wanted to be a journalist that could write and could fly a drone and could do 360-degree videos and tweet and video and all of these different things together. So that's where I started that journey, right back in 2010. And, you know, there's that idea of the 10,000 hour rule, that you need to spend 10,000 hours doing something to start to master it. And it's been a process of that, right? Like, we published 220 videos on Facebook before anybody knew who we were. Most of the videos didn't go anywhere. And it's that kind of perseverance and publishing and looking at analytics and responding to analytics and understanding how audiences consume, what they like, what they don't like, which helped inform decision making. And then moving from television to digital was like having to relearn everything. The videos that you do on TV is not the same as online. It's a whole new medium. So that's kind of how we thought. What was your second question? Sorry?
Right. Рахмет, Юсуф. Сонымен соңғы сұрақ онлайн көрерменнен келіп түсті. Юсуф.
Yeah, I don't think I had a personality that was particularly afraid of video. I think one thing to be conscious of is you don't have to be on camera, right? There's a lot of great video formats that don't require a journalist to be on camera. But if you are on camera and you are doing social media videos, you're also opening yourself up to the world. You're opening yourself up to criticism and potentially harassment, especially for young women. And you've got to kind of like distance yourself from the negativity, which is the only thing I would suggest. But no, I was never afraid of creating video content. I think it came very naturally to me.
Соңғы сұрақ қойсақ бола ма? Онлайн келіп түскен, онлайн көрермендерімізден. Юсуф, сіз телефонға ғана түсіріп моджа деп атанған жоқсыз, сонымен қатар очкиіңіз бар. Бізге очкиіңіздің сырын ашсаңыз, очкиіңізді қайдан алдыңыз, ол очкиге қанша минуттық видео жасай аласыз?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I wear spectacles every day of my life, camera sunglasses, and I've been wearing them pretty much since 2016 on a regular basis. These are glasses with cameras inside, but they're a lot more than that. They actually have screens inside. So if I just point you here, you can see little screens inside. And that is my entire internet experience. I can see stories and games and things that are relevant to my life, tools. And this is where the future of journalism is going, is 9 years' time, in 8 years' time, everybody who's sitting in this room, there's a few hundred of you there, you will all be wearing camera glasses on your faces, computers, and the internet will be layered onto the world. And it will be an amazing experience. You will fundamentally not be looking down at a mobile phone anymore, but looking back out at the world. So that's why I wear them. We innovate with this. We create not just shows that are filmed through people's eyes. For example, we did a COVID series where we sent glasses out to people, to frontline workers to document the stories through their point of view. But we also create stories through the augmented reality, so you can see stories play out. In answer to your question of where you can buy them from, unfortunately, these glasses are not for sale. They're still in a testing phase, but you can buy other versions of them at spectacles.com. And I think it's a really exciting future when we start thinking about wearable journalism and wearable storytelling.
Before closing up this session, сіздерге құлақтарыңызға алтын сырға, бүгін ғана бізбен Юсуф жақсы жаңалығымен бөлісті. Қаңтар, ақпан айларында Юсуф ICFJ немесе журналистердің халықаралық орталығы бағдарламасының аясында Қазақстанға келеді. Енді егерде Қарлығаш ханым маған осыны айт деп бұйырғаннан кейін, бұйырса келген кезде дәл қазір мысалы араларыңызда идеяларыңыз пайда болып, Юсуфпен бірге тренинг жасай аламыз, жасап көрейік деген бұқаралық ақпарат құралдарының өкілдері болса, бізге айтыңыздар, ақш елшілігі қолдайды деп айтайын ба? Қолдаймыз деп айтайын ба? Қарлығаш айтты, қолдаймыз дейді. Yusuf, thank you so much. That was a great session. Көп рахмет өзіңізге. КАЗФорумның парақшаларында, Юсуфтың парақшаларда белгіленген, Instagram болсын, YouTube болсын, сіз оны таба аласыздар деп ойлаймын. Көп рахмет. Thank you. Енді бұнымен мастер-класстар біткен жоқ. Самұрық пен есіл бөлмелерінде, самұрық бөлмесінде Айсана Әшімнің жүргізетін мастер-классы, есіл бөлмесінде Асхат Еркінбайдың жүргізетін мастер-классы болады. Рахмет назарларыңызға. Мастер-класстардан кейін қайта осы залда жиналамызда тамаша концертті көреміз, билейміз. Өзен лейблінің әртістері өнер көрсетеді. Кетіп қалмаңыздар.
Маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін КАЗФорум.кз сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФорум 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін КАЗФорум.кз сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФорум 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін КАЗФорум.кз сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФорум 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін КАЗФорум.кз сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФорум 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін КАЗФорум.кз сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФорум 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін КАЗФорум.кз сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФорум 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін КАЗФорум.кз сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФорум 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін КАЗФорум.кз сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФорум 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін КАЗФорум.кз сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФОРУМ 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін kazforum.kz сайтында тіркеліңіз. Нұр-Сұлтан қаласында 5 қарашада қазақ интернетінде онлайн-контент жасаушылардың 5 форумы КАЗФОРУМ 2021 өтеді. Үздік спикерлер, маңызды тақырыптар, пайдалы ақпарат. Форумға қатысу үшін kazforum.kz